transition from webinar to presentation live. So we've got that chat box, got all my windows open again. Okay, so good evening, everybody. Thank you for attending the University of Bradford School of Archaeological and Forensic Sciences guest lecture series. This is the final lecture of 2020. I'm sure many of us will be glad to see the back of 2020 and look ever forward to 2021, but we can't say goodbye to 2020 yet, because we have this evening's talk to look forward to. And I'm very pleased to welcome Nicholas Harrington, who will be giving this evening's presentation. Nicholas started off in executive search with kind of headhunting and fulfilling client positions for various clients that he worked with. From that role, he's moved through a variety of different positions and is now involved with a charity called Soldier On, which he set up. Soldier On is a charity intended at increasing employability skills for vulnerable individuals and working with those vulnerable individuals, utilizing heritage as a medium to build up different skills to upskill individuals essentially into employability positions and increasing their roles in society, and also after completing work in, for example, military services, rehabilitating and providing support through PTSD and other issues, as we've seen from other programs around different parts of the country. I'm very excited by the Soldier On project, and it is something which we hope to continue working with at Bradford as we go forwards in the coming years. But I'm going to hand over to Nicholas and allow him to continue the presentation. So thank you, Nicholas. Thank you, everybody.
Well, Ben, thank you very much indeed for the introduction, and good evening to everybody, and thank you for inviting me to come and talk to you this evening. As you can see, my apologies first and foremost that I'm not in a room with a whole load of terribly exciting books behind me. It seems to be the fashion these days, but like you, I live in Yorkshire. I'm in North Yorkshire, and technology has not extended so far that my broadband actually works in various parts of the house. So forgive me for that if I look a bit thick. But a little bit on my background. So as Ben says, I started my career as a headhunter, which for those of you who don't know, that sector is a very silly name for a recruiter. But I noticed relatively quickly, I went to go and talk to my boss and said, look, I just really struggling with one aspect of this role. And he said, well, what is that? And I said, well, you've asked me to interview 5 or 6 people, I can't remember the exact number, this week. And of those 5 or 6 people, I then have to write a report for the client. But they all, because I was working in the legal sector in those days, they all look the same. They all sound the same. They dress the same. They've had very, very similar experiences. How is it possible to pull these people apart? How do they stand out from the crowd? And his answer was relatively unhelpful. He said, go and find out and let me know. So I then completely self-taught, studied the various aspects of psychology and philosophy that were helping, that would be able to help people to understand more about what they are doing on this planet. A vocation seems to be something that is the preserve of priests, the church. And I believe very strongly that everybody is born with a calling. Everybody is born with a purpose. And my role was to try to help people to identify the meaning in their lives, to be able to understand their authentic capabilities, and to be able to move away from what often happens in this world is what I call the process of tell, where at a young age you might say, you know, I'm thinking about a career, for example, and people will say to you, I think you should do this. Or they will say, don't do this because you're not suited to it or whatever. So we live very much in the shadow of the blinkered opinion of other people. And what I wanted to do was equip people with the tools and the techniques to be able to plan and manage their careers and their lives for themselves. Because that's the other point in all this. I don't know if anybody watching this evening has recently had careers advice, but in my experience, it can be that we look at careers in a very stovepiped way, so that you as an individual, your self concept, if you like, is restricted to the you with your friends, you with your family, there's you with your charitable work, there's you with your within your sporting environment, there's you within many different fields of academia, and we tend to sort of be like little chameleons, where we change our personalities, our behavior, our values are altered depending on which situation we're in. And what I was particularly interested in was to try to see if there was a way of helping people to be authentic, and to help people go through a 3-stepped journey, not focusing on how do I get a job, but on focusing on the 2 really important parts that happen before that, which is who am I and where do I want to go? And then we can worry about how we're going to get there. So as Ben says, in 2008, I left the commercial world. I was finding it a little bit, it was too wrapped up in bonuses and quite frankly, bullying people to accept jobs, that there was very little investigation into whether it was right for them. And in 2008, I left the commercial world to set up Soldier On, whose primary purpose then was to support people who were about to be or who had been medically discharged from the armed forces to find gainful employment. And if you'll recall, in 2008, it was a high time, 2008 leading into 2009, were many casualties coming out of Iraq and Afghanistan. Operations like Panther's Claw in 2009, which saw high numbers of people who ended up being medically discharged and high numbers of people who survived injuries on the battlefield that they would never have survived in previous battles, previous wars. But I felt again that there was perhaps arguably too much attention being given to the awarding of the hero status, a little bit too much, almost getting a little patronizing, that it was about saying to people, come and put your uniform on, your medals on, and come and sit on the front row of Strictly Come Dancing or something, or have a free pint in my pub, when actually what people really wanted was a help to get through a critical, a often exhausting process of going through the resettlement process from the civilian world, from the army, into the civilian world. And my role was to really ensure that people found not just a job, but to find the right job for them. I thought that was the least that we could do really to really support people. And then there were lots of lessons being learned at the time. And one of the lessons was the number of times people said, well, it's great you do all this stuff for medically downgraded service personnel and medically discharged veterans, but what are you doing to help other people? With just one person, me, trying to do everything, it was the standard answer was, there's only one me, I can't do any more. And people forget that as many as 2,000 people are medically discharged every year from the armed forces. Forgetting any battlefield injuries, that is just a sort of standard number. Within that, obviously, people who've had road traffic accidents, got patellar tendonitis, cancer, whatever it may be. But I felt that about 3 years ago, the time was right to expand. That actually became a very healthy decision for the soldiers, because it meant that we weren't creating veterans ghettos. And I don't mean that rudely, but where if you get a veteran who's been out of the armed forces for some time, if you pull them back into a military-styled environment, very, very quickly the language goes back into the army language. We talk about that self-concept, and the self-concept, get this incongruence between the real self, the ideal self, the inauthenticity starts to disappear again. So actually it made a lot of sense to have many different people from different backgrounds working together. And also, we were looking for an activities-based intervention to the personal development that we offered. And Heritage just was perfect. It was absolutely perfect. And there's a precedent for all of this, because a lot of the work we do, as I said at the beginning, is based on psychology, particularly of a person-centered approach, a humanistic approach to psychology, where self-awareness is absolutely vital. And Freud was massively into archaeology. A lot of the psychologists of his time were. And what's the reason for that? Well, apart from a personal interest. The personal interest is, I was talking to an archaeologist the other day who said that they've been involved in the computer game Assassin's Creed. And they've been, their role was to make sure that what was being portrayed through the game was as realistic as it could be to the time of the game. And the person who mentioned this, we were also running a graveyard survey at the time with a group of year 6, so 10 and 11-year-olds in school. And she brought up the fact that she'd been working on Assassin's Creed to make some sense to the children, to create a connection between what she does and a world that they might understand. And Freud did exactly the same thing. He used what was in the public conscience of the time, that was the really fashionable, exciting thing. It was the newspapers, archaeology, very, very popular. And so he could explain his deep, complex thinking, often through the prism of something that so many people understood. So that precedent exists of the link between various aspects of psychology, of development of the self, of a sense of meaning, as in the sense of meaning that people like Viktor Frankl spoke about, who, if you're not aware of him, who was a psychologist who was in one of the concentration camps during the Second World War. And he identified that you can strip a person of everything, of their clothes. They can stand naked in front of you, but you cannot strip their ability to choose. And that ability to choose how they feel, or that connection with what life is all about, is something so fundamentally important. Now, we look at various aspects of heritage. It's not just archaeology at Soldier On, but as an activity, it is useful, particularly for people who don't like learning in a classroom environment. And the Soldier On Mark 1, where it was doing purely career transition support, it was very much whiteboard and markers and me standing up and getting in a huddle and discussing things. But there are lots of people who, that kind of environment, it's an anathema, it turns them off. And so to be able to do something where you can blend learning with practical experience, as you, the archaeologists, I'm not, I'm a complete pretender in this field, but you are the archaeologists who can understand that what you read in a book and then seeing it in the field, for lots of people that has more impact and is absorbed better. So I wanted to look this evening at some of the positives, the negatives, the risks, the good, the bad, and the ugly, as the title said. The positives that we identified are archaeology can be, and heritage projects can be, inclusive. It's a word that gets bandied around an awful lot. And actually, when you look at a lot of what's available, it's suddenly not so inclusive. And primarily that comes about because people feel that it is a world that is closed to them. But the reality is that we have seen 17-year-olds working with 70-year-olds. We've seen people of all different creeds, beliefs or no belief, different backgrounds, just complete and utter cross-section of educational ability. It doesn't matter. People work together. And it's such a team-oriented environment where, and I'm not being deliberately critical, forgive me, but if we dip back into the army world for a start, you probably come across the Invictus Games, a real demonstration of the capabilities, of the physical capabilities of people who have in some ways been completely written off. But with so many of these worlds, it's quite often, isn't it? It's about winning or losing, and the losing starts for so many people by not qualifying for the Paralympics or not qualifying for the Invictus Games, whereas archaeology can be open to everybody. It's the pace of the projects which can be dictated and altered and manipulated to suit the participants. And just, I know it's a very stereotypical example, but just quietly troweling away layer by layer in the sunshine, hopefully. This year's not been too good for either sunshine or being able to do anything as a group. But it's I use the word with real caution, but it is therapeutic. It can be. There's the community side of it. All of the Soldier On projects, we try to engender a sense of community cohesion. And that comes about by working with universities, with schools, with local heritage groups, local archaeologists, anyone who's just interested but may have a skill. And all of the projects that we run, they try to have an element of skill enhancement to them. So not archaeology, but a recent project we ran in the Isle of Wight in October was a cosmetic tank restoration project, Cold War era tank. We had 6 young, long-term unemployed people with various other problems, social problems and health problems. And they worked through the wettest Saturday on record, but they did it. And they're now working with a local college, the Isle of Wight College, but to now design and produce QR codes and a 3D online interactive image of the tank. And they're learning those digital skills that are directly transferable to the world of work. But that's, again, can only be achieved by bringing in different aspects of the community. There's the education side, obviously learning all the time. And our projects, what we really love is when you get that bridging of the gap between academia, what some people might call the real world, but certainly other sectors. So I've mentioned schools, I've mentioned universities, but there's also the other charities that we work with, local councils, business, lots of different organizations coming together, learning from each other, having those barriers taken down that allow people to say things like the 17-year-old student who was working in a trench with someone who was ex-military. Now this particular student had been born and brought up near Barnsley. I think Arthur Scargill was one of their neighbours. They said to me after the first day, I was brought up in a world where we were taught to hate the army. We thought that soldiers drank too much, swore too much, they were aggressive. And she said, just having had one day working with that person has completely altered my opinion. So there's a diversity of thought comes into all of this, which is really, really important. Now, I've mentioned psychology. And psychology, think about your Freud or Jung or whoever you want to think about from the older days, right through to the more modern psychologists. What they do is it's all about peeling back the layers. And to those people who have archaeology experience watching this tonight, not just listening, but watching, that's what you do. You peel back the layers across a temporal expanse, and you unearth what exists underneath layer upon layer upon layer. And that's what happens with self-awareness. That is what's happening with mental health support, is often taking people on that journey of a mental exploration, of peeling back the layers. So the parallels exist of helping people to explore deeply who they are as a person, but also to be able to think more about the goals that they have in life. So it's about detecting the self, if you like. So there are strong, strong parallels between the world of psychology and archaeology. And one aspect of what I'm talking about, for example, is Erich Fromm, who wrote an awful lot about the importance of being in the here and now, which to a greater extent in today's world is what people would talk about mindfulness. It's being absolutely focused, or another psychologist, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, I have been practicing, who talked about flow theory. And a critical aspect of flow theory is being deeply, deeply, deeply absorbed in what you're doing, to the point you're so absorbed that there can be no room for emotion. If you think about whether you're happy or sad, there's no space for it until you reflect on it later, because at the time you're completely in the zone. And that is something that has been reported to me by people working in archaeology, is they can be so intensely focused on what they're doing and being immersed in the here and now. And I've talked about Frankl, Viktor Frankl, who identified the need in each of us to be able to find our purpose, to be able to find that sense of meaning, the reason why we get out of bed in the morning. And increasingly, that is something that's really hard. We live in a world where advertising, the education we receive, the parents, there's so much conditioning goes on that we can lose sight of what truly matters to us. And so going back to the pace of archaeology, going back to the exploration of archaeology, going back to the supporting each other in a team environment and being fully absorbed, you have within archaeology the most beautiful, beautiful platform to help people. There are also, I mentioned earlier, I talked about, I said I think that I use the word with great caution of therapy, because I do hear quite a lot that people try to use the word therapy when they're talking about archaeology or any community-based project indeed. And I think that's something that we have to be very, very careful about, is using medical terminology if we are not medically trained, or making assumptions based on what we have seen. Because remember that everything you experience in life has to go through what you see, what you hear, through a filtering process of interpretation. But that filter is it's very much a construct of what makes sense to you based on the meanings that you have had in your life. And so, when we're talking about things like therapy, again, we have to be very careful, because what somebody sees may not be the reality. It can be very dangerous. Now, forgive me, COVID, working from home, if you hear a 4-year-old screaming in the background, that it's not a goat, it is my son. So I'm sorry about that. It's nearly his bath time. But one of the other aspects that I've recently wrote about was Yalom, who is one of the great writers and thinkers and explorers within group therapy. And the article I wrote recently looked at Yalom's 11 factors of group therapy. And I don't know, I hope you agree with me, but I saw in different depths each of the 11 happening. So let's think about these for a second, if we can. And I've got to, obviously I'm looking left at my notes here because my memory is dreadful. But one of the first factors that Yalom talked about was an installation of hope. And that is something, hope that life can change, hope that life goes on. When you're digging and picking up artifacts from the past, it shows to you the extent of our existence, the creativity that has existed for so long. And this idea of the installation of hope from just receiving an email that says you've been offered a place to join our excavation, or just from the initial conversations you can have, it does creep in. There's a sense of universality when you get that group cohesion going, that we're all in this together, if that doesn't sound too much like a politician. but we have a common purpose. We are all belonging to a similar group with similar aims, and it's like, one person in a lifeboat in the middle of the Atlantic is going to not feel as secure as 10 people huddled together. One of the factors that's very important is the imparting of information. Callum identified how critical this is for information flow, for people to be picking up information. And that, I think everybody should nod and agree that that level of information flowing. Altruism is one of the other things. Doing things for the sake of doing, not out of a need of reciprocity, is that the right word? But you don't do something, you don't pour someone a glass of water because you think they're then going to give you a nice car at the end of the day. You do it because it's the right thing to do. And that sense of altruism, on a minor level, but also on a far bigger level, can exist within the archaeological world. And so can the recapitulation of the primary family group. Often what happens, I've seen it time and again with groups of marginalized, vulnerable and disadvantaged people, is that where there have been problems perhaps within their family life or their social life, by immersing themselves in a different group of people, you kind of recalibrate the social norms. And again, the experiences, the filter that I talked about, the sense of meaning, can be massively enhanced, made more pleasurable, boosted, when the sense within the group environment is that this is actually the way that people behave. It isn't as I've come to expect it. So that's very, very important in terms of the behavioral dynamics. Development of socializing techniques. We often work with a lot of people for whom weeks and weeks and weeks before, they've been sitting at home, their friend has been the television. That sounds stereotypical, but it is often what I hear. We did a project at the Royal Hospital Chelsea with the Chelsea pensioners. We did a graveyard survey of their burial ground. And I said to one of the pensioners, as I looked at this incredibly exclusive environment, where they're beautifully looked after, but I said, what would you normally be doing on a Saturday afternoon? And he said, really? Lying on my bed, staring at the ceiling and waiting till tea time. Which is very interesting because it was a real glimpse into how you can be isolated within a group. And so for those people who turn up to an archaeological project, for a 2-week project, for example, you relearn often the social graces, social abilities, having a conversation with somebody. And through those conversations, listening to somebody else's perspective. I suppose there's an element of emotional intelligence creeping in there as well. So that's important. We look at imitative behavior. I'm conscious of the time. So imitative behavior about, again, responding to right ways of behaving within the group dynamic. There's the interpersonal learning, group cohesiveness. 10th factor was a sense of catharsism. And actually, when you have the archaeological digs from our perspective, where the most critical time can occur is sitting around a barbecue in the evening, having a chat, having a drink. And then of course, there are the existential factors. In part, the reason why we blend personal development with archaeology. There are risks. There are massive, massive risks to this world. Who you work with is very, very important. You've got to be so careful. We as an organisation, we won't work with anybody who's currently under a mental health care plan unless we've got full cooperation and buy-in from their caregiver. The most fundamental thing is do no harm. But often we can do a lot of harm if we don't get it right. The other side of this is what one does. And a question for people watching tonight, and something to think about, is there a risk that community archaeology, can it deprofessionalize, if that's a word? Can it dilute the professionalism? Lots of people watching this tonight, you're doing degrees, you'll do masters, you'll do PhDs. It's a lot of learning, it's a lot of time commitment and financial investment. And when you read that HS2, for example, were at one stage advertising for diggers, you have to question whether what we're doing has any risk to the sector as a whole. I'm not saying it does, but what I'm saying is we've got to be grown up enough to have those conversations and not frighten off the people who are doing this professionally. And there's obviously the whole metal detecting side of it, report writing. If you're doing this with a group of volunteers, are you going to get the same standard of report writing? A lot of the people involved are volunteers. You've got to keep them happy. They can walk off site at any time and say, this isn't for me. And we've got to make sure that that all the way through, the well-being and the welfare of our participants is absolutely paramount. Lengths of projects is something to discuss. Avoiding, as I've hinted at, it just being a professional hobby. And there are wider sector risks that include things like the cultural challenges that exist globally. They certainly exist in this country. And we've seen that reflected in the statues being toppled, put into Bristol Harbour. I mean, that's nothing new. We've been doing that for centuries, toppling statues. But it is something that's important to think about today. Bullying. Is archaeology going through a bit of a Me Too movement? Certainly when that lady won her award for the work that she'd done, there was a lot of giggling. This is a high-profile thing that happened last year. I think we have to be sort of aware of these things that are happening. Are minority groups included or excluded? Funding is a really big issue in this world. And I think it's very important that we don't end up looking at what money is available, designing a project that suits. I think that outward-inward approach is not suitable. I know that makes it difficult often to get the money in, but I think it's far better that we actually look for where is the real need and try to do something about it. Of course, there's the whole Brexit thing. In conclusion, I think we've done half an hour. I think that's about right. I can talk a lot more, but in conclusion, I think that clearly community heritage projects, community archaeology as a sector, it's growing, getting bigger. And we have to consider the opening up of that sector for all the reasons that I have mentioned. And I think it's absolutely vital that we develop multidisciplinary engagement and not do the sort of hunkered down, blinkered, we're doing it this way because we've always done it this way, or we're doing it this way because we know best. Really, really important that we feel that you've got to reach out and say to people, well, is there another way? And have that academic discussion where you're not afraid to look at all sorts of different avenues and different ways of achieving things. And that leads me on to that thought that therefore there is an opportunity here within archaeology to bridge that gap out of the sciences, out of the humanities, into other areas as broad as catering, fashion, engineering. Those are just three. But if you dig up a pot that has been used by someone to eat, they've been eating something. And there are so many, many different opportunities for, as I said, that multidisciplinary cross-pollination approach where archaeology has a chance now to open the doors. And it's already doing it, but to welcome people and not be too staid, not be too academic, not be too sort of, we don't want to go there, it's a little bit too risky. Open the doors, let in the light, and learn from each other, I think is very, very important. But there are challenges, and the undergraduate and the postgraduate starting out students who are watching this evening, the baton is being passed to you, my friends. The future is in your hands. And I, for one, when I'm sitting, staring out of the window with my tartan rug around my legs and stroking a cat and not able to do an awful lot else, I will be looking and wondering, what have you done with this opportunity. And all I meet the whole time is students who are absolutely fantastic, really fantastic. They are such a joy to work with. And I'm hoping very much that students from Bradford will be working with us on the site of a 12th century priory, a little bit further east than Bradford, but within a commutable distance. So I don't know, this evening's probably been terribly boring. Have we missed EastEnders? There are other things you could have been doing. I don't know, but I think that they're ultimately, there's an opportunity for some real good to happen. You guys are doing it. And I'll close now, but if there are any questions, is that, Ben, how it's going to work?
Hi, yes, Nicholas. So, yes, we will jump to some questions in a second.
Okay.
But I just want to give a big round of applause first. Thank you. And thank you very much for the talk. That was fascinating. If anyone does have any questions, please do drop them into the chat box there, and I can either invite you in to ask a question, or I can ask a question on your behalf. But I'll start off with a couple. I've seen your question, Maggie. We'll come on to that in a second. So it is fascinating to see that the different sides. We get a lot of academic projects which focus primarily on the positive aspects of community engagement, but limited details on the risks and the dangers that go with it. So it's great to see that coming through in discussion around those points going forwards. But also, you made me think about some really quite fundamental aspects that I hadn't necessarily considered before, such as those the general group communication skills and interaction skills between people. So when I've previously volunteered on excavation when I was pre-undergraduate, so quite a few years ago now, 20 odd years ago, there was a range of volunteers on the excavation, various ages, as you say, and just interacting with different people hadn't realised that maybe actually this is the first time some of these people have been out in a social setting for quite a long time. So getting those new skills or rebuilding those skills back up is quite a significant aspect. Are there any particular challenges that you think go with that, or should we try and build in some sort of pre excavation build-up, so some pre-excavation, just general interaction sessions for half days, or should we just go straight into the excavation works and in at the deep end to some extent, just straight into those activities?
Well, the first thing I would say is that I would never want to position myself as the authority on how it should be done. I think that's quite dangerous. My experience and my opinion would say that has led us as an organisation to do everything in, as I said, that person-centred approach, the sort of Rogerian, Carl Rogers side of Maslow side of psychology, to the point that when people arrive on a project, that's quite a dangerous time. That is a critical time, because people arrive, and if they don't know anybody, then there is the great risk that is the time for a wobble, and they may just get in the car and go. And that's no different to anybody, quite frankly. Whether you're vulnerable, disadvantaged, or you think you're king of the world and rocking and haven't got a problem. But we try to put ownership of the project onto the participants. So even to the point that the project name, okay, that's up to you guys to come up with the project name. Everything we pull back, and everything is run in a way that the participants feel that they have a level of control. Now, these are people who spent a lot of time sitting in the back seat. They've been told who they are. They've been told how to live their life. It can be quite structured. It's heavily reliant on often medicine or other people to get them through day to day. And suddenly they get a real shake because we say, well, what do you think? So, we won't just stand there and go, blah, 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 here's another health and safety brief. We will say, what do you feel are the things we need to consider? Has anyone got any experience of this? Has anyone done this and probably knows more than we do? So we encourage people to do those sorts of things. We encourage people to take turns at being team leaders. And then there are really tiny little things like we found, rather than, again, the boring, could you stand up, please tell us your name and a little bit about you, is get everyone to have a conversation, which normally happens anyway. And then again, shake people up by saying, Ben, would you like to please introduce Nicholas? Mm-hmm. So, what have you learned already from this person? And again, this is all very part of the sort of subtle approach that we're trying to achieve. Is if we go back to this self-concept thing, it is that mixture of who you think you are, but through presentation of the self, how do you come across to someone else? So those are all really important things. Does that answer that question? Sorry.
Yeah, I think it does. Thank you. Yeah, really useful. Thank you. So we had a question coming from Karina. I'm going to give you microphone access, Karina. So if you wanted to ask your question, do please go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, thank you. It's a really great talk, a really interesting project. I was just wondering something on quite a practical level, and how you go about evaluating the project, like how that works.
Okay. Karina, that's an absolutely fantastic question. It really is, because and the reason I'm smiling is only because it's the question that gives us the most difficulty.
That's kind of why I was asked.
Yeah, so thanks for that.
Cheers.
So the reason it gives us difficulty is because, again, we feel that is something that needs to be considered on an individual level, as well as from a project by project level. I said to Ben earlier, so I'm as you can see from my receding hairline, I am a mature part-time PhD student. And one of the things that I really struggled with was the ethics. The reason I struggled with ethics was because I had to put in the questions that I was going to be asking of the cohort of interviewees. I had to send everybody a project plan, what it was all about, what I was trying to establish, and blah, blah, blah. And there's a risk to that, of course, is that you've gone and teed up your participants to the danger of giving you what they think you want to hear before you've even started. You've also got to recall that I have a real hatred. They're very popular, particularly again with the funders, but I have a real hatred of the simplicity of giving somebody a survey and saying, did you enjoy your experience with us? Did it change your life? Because a lot of the time people feel that they owe you something. They know you've worked hard to organize these projects. They've seen you doing everything from morning, noon, and night to look after people. And so there's a bit of a bullying pressure to say to me, yes, it's been fantastic, thank you very much. Likewise, we've been looking at working with a university that does an awful lot of well-being assessments. And again, any sort of quantitative survey approach really terrifies me. And I personally believe that there is only one way that you can evaluate the efficacy of what you do. And in many respects, it's the wrong way because it's time consuming and all the rest of it. You can only sit down and discuss with somebody. What's your feeling? But talk to me. Tell me about it. Get somebody independent to sit down with that person if needs be and have a conversation, and do that when the project's over, 6 months later, a year later. We've really got to find out what effect these things have, but it is far too simplistic. And it's actually, forgive me, but it's quite pathetic if we just rely on, did you have a nice time? Yes, I did. And then we just move on.
Yeah.
So the narrative inquiry, I think, which, you know what, we're really bad. And archaeology and the more the study of people should tell us that the art of telling a story is dying out. And so for me, that's the greatest excitement, is getting somebody through narrative to be able to allow you to pick up what is it that has real meaning for you, not for everybody else on the group, but for you.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Karina.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Karina. Really good question, a good answer, very thought-provoking answer there. I just jotted down some notes on my notepad, because it is normally a part of most funding applications, is how you're going to assess the impact of these. And as you say, it does become very much almost a tick box. Did you enjoy the activity? And that it is
yet another feedback form.
A feedback form, and it's some, as you said, Nicholas, it is something which is there, and people do feel either consciously or unconsciously pressured into giving a positive answer, especially if you've got one of those Likert scores, 0 to 10, you'll end up with a score 6 to 8 or above. Normally, if you stand there and hand someone a question and say, what do you think, you'll end up with a positive score. So I wonder if we should try and build into funding applications something, as you said, so 6 months down the line, an independent assessor to come and do that kind of impact, to then demonstrate to funders the longer term impact that projects have. So I've written that down as a note for myself for going forwards. But we had another question come in, which I'm sure that many of the students that we have in the session will be interested in, particularly those which have just progressed into their second year. Because Maggie, I'll give you microphone access, Maggie, if you wanted to ask your question.
So can you hear me all right?
Yes, Maggie. Yes. Yeah, we can hear you. Thank you. Yeah.
Hello, Maggie.
Hello. Hi, Nick. Well, thank you very much. It's very, very good to have a different perspective. And with your experience, and I'm interested in how you might now be sort of working with the university. Will you be having a different approach perhaps to how the university might usually go about doing a project? And also, could you perhaps tell us a little bit about what the project actually is to do with this 12th century priory, please?
Maggie, again, thanks very much for asking the question. Split into two parts. The first part, I'll do it in reverse order, if that's okay. The first bit is so we are looking at, we as an organisation, as a charity, we did a very basic excavation in a paddock. So once we'd turfed the horses out and they'd found somewhere else to live, we had a couple of weeks working in a paddock. The landowner was dying. He was dying of cancer. And he asked me to go and see him. And he said that he had added into his will a codicil to give Soldier On the permission to continue working in his paddock for up to 3 years after his death. So an amazing thing to do. And thank you, COVID. We've lost a year, but never mind. So I spoke with Chris and with Ben to see what would be the possibility of doing a proper dig, if you like, with Bradford University. And what I'm hoping is that we will be able to engage with students, with the university, to conduct an excavation of this 12th century priory, small bit of the priory, obviously, in the paddock. What I'm hoping is that the students can engage with us in a sort of, in that bilateral approach where they can give their knowledge and expertise and can become student supervisors. And at the same time, they will gain, I hope, valuable experience of working with potentially minority or disadvantaged or marginalized groups. And that is a different type of management than the traditional going into the commercial archaeology world and working with people who are completely competent, know what they're doing. But actually, having said that, with, what is it, 1 in 3 of us suffering from some form of mental health problem, I think the reality is that people are going to get a shock when they think they go into the commercial archaeology space and think that everything's just absolutely perfect and everyone knows what they're doing and all the rest of it. So this experience could well be something that people will fall back on as a reminder of a time when they learnt how to do things in a different way.
Oh, thank you very much. And how many people would be sort of supervising the students and helping them to, you know, if they needed to discuss what they were doing, would they have people that they could turn to if they felt that the people that they, as new supervisors of the community, needed some support?
Do you mean, sorry, what support do you mean, just so I can be clear?
Well, say they had, say somebody, a student who was supervising somebody from the community who was taking part in the excavation, had some sort of mental health problem, and so the student felt they needed some backup, somebody to talk to. How many people would be able to help that student?
So Maggie, I've got what you're saying. I mean, what we clearly cannot do is, I mean, if we start trying to design projects that are trying to teach people how to manage possible negative effects of a mental health crisis, that's not what we're trying to achieve here. And that is why I go back to the original point that we will not work with somebody who is currently under a mental health care plan unless we've got buy-in, and buy-in means attendance by their caregiver to ensure, or the organisation that they are being cared for, to ensure to the best we possibly can that we are going to do no harm and that the situation is not going to escalate to one where that student would need. But we're not expecting those student supervisors to supervise somebody's care or health. We are expecting them to supervise the professional running of a trench. If there is a problem in terms of an interpersonal relationship problem, then that is something that the staff, i.e. the soldier-on people or our partners who are there, will give that student absolute support. But we will be observing and aware and hopefully stepping in before such a situation arises. But it also goes back to the point that when we're working with a particular group, the collaborative approach means that that where we're working with a charity, another charity, to help to work with their members, it means that you've got that almost wraparound support from the organisation that are taking part as well. So it goes back to the point that I made of hands up, we're not experts of everything. I do believe that I'm quite good at helping people to understand more about their values, their goals, their behaviour, their intrinsic motivation and stuff like that. And I don't need a huge amount of support on that, although we're always learning. But anything else, we've got people who do these things regularly and know what they're talking about involved.
Oh, thank you. That sounds like a very worthwhile and adding quite a lot for the students' experience. Thank you very much, Nicholas.
Thank you very much, Maggie.
Thank you, Maggie. Some very good questions there, and I think if people remember back to the talk from the 10th of November, then I've forgotten her name now. Sorry, if Karina, you might be able to remind me. From Oxford,
Rachel Kiddy.
Rachel Kiddy, yes, working with displaced groups and homeless groups around different parts of the UK and parts of Europe. Then, as part of her research project, she was mandated to go on a almost PTSD course after partaking in that research project because of the encounterments that she was having. but then walking back from those displaced communities back into her own privileged daily Western life was a bit of a culture shock. So I'm sure that Karina and Adrian have experienced fairly similar things, having been out to refugee camps in Jordan as well, and then coming back to the UK. So I think when we do set up these student projects, working with special needs, it's not the correct term, but special needs groups, then we probably should look at factoring in some form of emotional support for them afterwards. But it's not just for these specific group projects, it's for general archaeological research projects as we go forward, I think. So it should be factored in more into general research projects. But I think we should probably look at that when we do start up the excavation down in Hampole as well, from general student union support side. There are things that we can utilise if we need to. So it's a very good question. I don't know if Karina or Adrian, you want to have some input on your experiences from Jordan there as well. I think Adrian's dropped off actually, but Karina's still there.
Yeah, so what was that? Personal impacts of working in, when Rachel was talking about this, it really resonated, because you're in, I suppose it's to some extent you always get back when you've been on field work. It's such a different way of life for that short period of time. But then when you're working with people that where you are essentially very, very privileged and very lucky in life, you can't help but just have that kind of constant guilt. And I think there's, you know, a lot of work to be done with moving beyond that and trying to find a place with that. So I'm giving a bit of a rambling answer, really. Is Adrian still there? Has he disappeared?
I think Adrian's encountering some internet troubles.
Okay.
But no, it's a good answer. Thank you. And it is.
I think, sorry, Ben, can I just interrupt on that point? Sorry, because I obviously want to find out a lot more about what you're doing with in Jordan and in other areas. But there's also, I mean, you draw on your own personal experiences, and I can. My supervisor said to me today, he said, "You're the poshest person we've ever met in this university," and. Not that I'm chippy or anything, but you got to kind of go beyond what's there, and certainly, you know, not to put me in a position of center position, but who you see today sitting in this computer screen is a very different person to who I was as a child. I mean, I was homeless for nearly 6 years.
Yeah.
And poverty was something that was very familiar to me, my brother and my mother. And living in a condemned flat eventually, after 6 years of 1 night here and 2 nights there and a week here, eventually going into a flat that had been condemned by the very same council that were allowing us to live in it, with fungus and mold all over the walls and water pouring down on the inside of the walls and everything. And those are experiences that still sit and live with me today, and do. I think they've been a drive. They've been a real drive to leaving that commercial world and setting up a charity. But these things sort of they haunt you inside, don't they? They sit there and haunt you a little bit. But it is also quite again, talking about this shaking people up thing. It's quite cool to say to somebody, "Oh, do you know what being homeless is like? Believe it or not." No, you don't. You've no idea. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And challenging those stereotypes of what people see
Definitely
isn't what that person is like and their experiences.
No, indeed.
Yeah, definitely. So we've got one more question come in. I'll call you in, Shirley, to ask your question. I realise you said the first part was a comment rather than a question, but there is a question on the end there, so I'm going to call you in now. There we go.
Had a comment from Norman as well in the chat.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Ben. I'll try and keep this brief. Thank you so much for that, Nicholas. That was really, really insightful and really inspirational as well. I really like the bit where you said about where some of the people just arrive on site and feel quite intimidated, so you try and get them before they get in their car and leave again, because you know, even prior to my training and even after my training, I've gone on sites and felt you know, just quite intimidated. So it's really nice to hear that you kind of engage them from the moment they step foot on site. That's a really nice thing.
Thank you.
So, you're welcome. so just a comment I wanted to make, which may be of use or not, but a heritage company I worked with a few years ago, and still in contact with, thankfully, have done loads of fantastic community archaeology projects whereby they focus on well-being of marginalised and vulnerable groups. And I think one way that they tackle the evaluation stage was literally gave some of the participants a camera, or if they had their own phone camera or whatever, and said, right, you're in charge of your evaluation. You go away and do a vlog, or, you know, you keep a diary of, you know, how you found your experiences on site. And that was a really good way for them not to feel pressured to just sort of do a tick box and sign a form, or give over, you know, a kind of a formal evaluation. So that was something that they found really successful. So I can put you in touch with them if you want another time. And I guess I kind of just have a little question at the end. So in terms of well-being, what do you anticipate, or what do you hope would be the benefits for the students working on these projects? Actually, I'll change that. Not just the students, the student and the excavator relationships. How do you find that being of a benefit to the mutual parties?
So the first part, Shirley, thank you very much indeed. Any introduction to anybody who's working in this field is who is rated as doing it sensibly is hugely appreciated. Thank you. The camera idea is something that we were keen to speak to somebody who has actually done that before, because if you remember our own heritage of working with only with soldiers, the last time often a soldier can form any sense of contact, mental contact with having a camera shoved in your face, it conjures up some fairly dark images, and so those are things that we had to be very mindful of. The sort of like, I'm a celebrity, get me out of here, going into the little room and doing a sort of camera thing is I know it sounds trite, but for a lot of people that might sometimes signify sort of flags and all sorts behind you. That's not for me to judge them. That's the opinion. So it'll be interesting now that we've parked that to see how that can be done sensibly. So thank you, Shirley. Second part of going back to your question, the benefits amongst both groups of people, and we make it very, very clear in the way that we design things that there is not a them and us culture created. So if any student thinks they're going to turn up and start lording it over our participants, no. So the important factor is learning from each other, and giving both student and participant an opportunity to shine. And by that I mean a participant may have a particular skill or a particular experience that they've not utilized for quite some time, or something that they don't feel is relevant, and they start judging themselves. And if opportunity can be seen to be grabbed very, very quickly for both individuals to feel that they have something worthwhile to contribute, then we will readily grab that. At the same time, though, you move away from the sort of any risk of I've got a degree, I know what I'm talking about, and you don't know what you're talking about, type thing, because we're very talent focused, we're very trait, aptitude focused. So whilst we are obviously working with people who know what they're talking about from an archaeological perspective, we're also always acutely looking out and trying to draw out the innate abilities in individuals for which there is no qualification. There's no piece of paper with a signature at the top and a crest saying you are highly competent at persuading people to a certain line of thinking. Right. So by mixing everything around that construct of talent awareness, people kind of just sort of blob in all together, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, but
Thank
you'll
you.
have to come and see it, Shirley, and then you can
Yes,
judge
absolutely.
it.
I'm involved in a I'm involved with the monastic site at the moment, so I'd really love to come and yeah, that's my bag. Yeah, definitely.
Brilliant. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shirley.
Thank you, Shirley. I think that is all of the questions we've had come in. So I'm going to say thank you very much, Nicholas. That was highly thought-provoking and very interesting to see your perspectives on the community engagement and upskilling of archaeology and the role of archaeology in contemporary society. I think one of the benefits that we can anticipate for any students that go on the project would be development of skills, development of not management skills as such, but recognition skills, recognizing people's strengths and abilities and pushing them to develop and shine and excel in what they do. So developing people, but also understanding the wider relevance of heritage in a modern society and the use that heritage can be for contemporary groups around the UK and around the world, bringing archaeology and heritage into much more social relevance rather than being purely knowledge creation for the sake of knowledge creation, which is it's a perfectly good aim. But if we can combine that with social impact, then it gives us a much stronger voice in society and helps us develop society as a whole through the use of heritage and archaeology. So very much looking forward to developing the Hampole project in the next year and getting that excavation up and running once we can, under COVID restrictions, actually meet up outdoors and begin excavation again. But thank you again, as I say, for a really fascinating talk. It was really interesting, and I'm sure that everyone else here will have joined me in a round of digital applause, even though you can only hear me giving me applause there and Karina as well. But I'm sure everyone would join us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And I hope that you have a wonderful Christmas break. I know it seems a little bit early on the 1st of December, but it is that time of year. So I hope you have a fabulous Christmas and hope everyone in the audience has a wonderful Christmas break as well. And we'll see you in the new year when we resume the University of Bradford School of Archaeological and Forensic Sciences guest lecture series. That calendar will be coming out via the TMAP page in the near future. So thank you very much, Nicholas. Have a fabulous Christmas and New Year, and I'll be in contact. Thank you all.
Thank you.
That was fabulous. Thank you, Nicholas. I really enjoyed that. That was excellent.
Thanks, Ben, very much.
There's some. I won't go into. We got other comments. Thank you, comments and bits coming in the chat box, and a comment from Norman about discussions with a psychotherapist and themselves identifying similarities between archaeological fieldwork and psychotherapy and the skills and methodologies utilised to understand those complexities. And archaeology is about understanding complex situations and making the links there, but also highlighting those links to people. So that's something good to see. But we do have people in the room still, so I won't chat too much about the various project potentials, but I'll drop you an email tomorrow or Thursday about those different projects which are potentially there, and I'll copy in Chris as well, and we can try and get some things organised because they sound really interesting.
Ben, thanks very much, Steve, for having me. And I think there's 7 participants still sitting there, so thank you. 7.
Well, that's us two, and Chris has got his hand up. I can see.
He's got his hand up. Wow.
Were you off? I think he's put his hand up and forgotten it's there. He's mistaken a hand for a clap icon. Oh no! Oh, he can't talk because I've not unmuted him. If I allow him to talk, there you go, Chris. You're allowed to talk now, if you want to.
Hello. You there?
Hello, Chris.
Hi, Nick. Thanks so much for that. That was really great. you know, it was so thoughtful, and I think it expressed a really great vision that you have of basically utilizing the skill sets of young people to much greater endeavor than perhaps we do normally in society. It's a fantastic project. The overall project, the idea is great, and all I really wanted to say was that I really look forward to working with you in the future. And thank you so much for giving this talk, because from the comments that I've read and I've heard from people, it's been really fantastic and I think aspirational. Thank you.
Chris, it was only made possible with you taking a phone call and then inviting me to see you. So I think the thanks goes very much to you.
Well,
as well.
To be honest, it was great. It was great to see somebody else in the office instead of the usual. Thank you very much. Anyway.
Thank you very much, Chris. You take great care. Bye bye.
Cheers, Chris. I'll drop you a mail with Nick tomorrow, and then we can have a chat about some things.
Okay.
Who have we got? So, are you still in?
I'm just loitering to say I'll forward on those details to you, Ben. You can pass on to.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. Okay. Will do.
Okay.
Thanks, Jenny.
Right, I'll sign off. Thank you very much again. That was fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Are you still in the room, Mia? I've allowed you to have microphone access if you want to say anything. So Mia's one of our second year students now. But she's not. She might not be in the room still. She's not unmuted.
I think her microphone is switched off.
Yeah, she might have. She might have left the laptop and gone. But
gone for a COVID test.
I think. Well, Mia will be doing the travelling COVID tests in the next couple of days, so they'll have time.
She's still there. She's still there. She says, "Sorry, the option hasn't come up."
Try again, Mia. It's got talking permitted after your name on my screen, but it's not doing it apparently. Okay, maybe if I promote you to a panelist, let's try that. Try now.
Oh.
Yeah. No. Yeah. No. Don't know. Just type in the chat box if you like, Mia. So I can't remember if you indicated you wanted to do the local fieldwork option, Mia, when we were planning for fieldwork this summer, when we first discussed it at the start of, I think it was start of January, when we were talking about the fieldwork options, and then things rapidly got moved around because of COVID. So if you are interested in doing the local fieldwork option, that will be most likely over at Hampole with Nicholas and myself and Chris as various supervisors on days. So I was just hoping to get you to be able to chat to Nicholas just briefly while we're here. But
well, Mia's made a comment of says, "I mean, any experience is good."
Yeah, any experience is good.
And Mia, the only thing I very rudely pull you up on that is no, not any experience is good. You've got to go and bully and make sure that the experience is right for you, because you're the most important person.
Yeah, it is a good experience is good, but it does have to be the right experience and a beneficial experience. If it's not a positive experience, then it's no benefit. Realistically, it needs to be an experience which achieves an aim rather than just an experience. I've had lots of just experiences, experienced lots of things on a daily basis, and they don't actually necessarily provide a benefit. They're something that happens, but it's never always something you actually want to achieve. Being isolated in your apartment for a month, it's difficult at the moment. And I think a lot of when we do start to do field work again, it will be more. There'll be a lot of adjustment from people getting back into face-to-face contact, I think, and so everybody will be in that situation of spending most of the day sat in the bed looking at the ceiling waiting for tea time at the moment. It'll be a lot of people in the same kind of four-wall space on a daily basis. And then when we get back into the field, there will be a lot of rapid adjustment for people into social settings. And then the concern around face masks and hand contact and things, I'm not sure how long that'll take to disappear once we have a mass vaccine rollout, but I can see for a while people will still be fairly wary around any sort of physical contact between people, and certainly much more cautious in activities that go on, I guess.
But it's no bad thing. I mean, you think, you know, the life I lived before, your laptop would go on a railway train table that, you know, you'd eat your sandwich with the same hand that you've just been rooting around for your ticket and all sorts. But what I would say to Mira, if she's still listening, is you know, there are benefits as well to isolation. I'm not going down the track of the obvious ones and trying to be all cool and make you feel better. But one of the things that I would suggest to anybody who's been living in isolation throughout the COVID environment, COVID pandemic, is try to spend a little bit of time thinking about what is it about you that continued to exist even in isolation, and what is it about your behavior and your character that, even though there was this dramatic change in environment and circumstance and situation, what's the golden thread that just keeps going through all these different situations? I mean, for me, I'm still late. I'm still terrible at technology. Those things have not changed. They're fundamentally a part of who I am. And whether you're at home isolated, or whether you're out in your wheat field, Mia, there are going to be things that just remain constant about you. And that's very important, I think, within self-awareness, is being true to yourself. It's just a thought. It's just something to consider.
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you, Nicholas. I shall let you go and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you again for the lecture. It was really fascinating, and really loads of positive comments coming through there on the chat box and from the staff and general members of the public as well. So it's really useful.
Well, that's really humbling. Thank you, everybody. And
I hope the presentation earlier on today went well for the PhD.
Yes, I've got to know. I'm moving on to the methodology and methods section, so I'm going to have a fun Christmas. And I'm going to be the really awful person that people are like, mate, there's been a vaccine for the last 2 years. Where have you been? I'm like, I'm sitting at home working. It's excellent. I'll go and get my little one in the bath. But thank you all very, very much indeed. Ben, have a lovely Christmas. So I don't speak. Well, we'll chat. We'll chat. We'll
chat before. But thank you, Nicholas. That's really
good. Take care. I'll say goodbye now.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. How do I do this?